skipped a part of my presentation too.
And so, oh, here we go. Sorry to cut you off, Heather. We are back, everyone. We had a technical issue with our previous feed here a moment ago. Dr. Heather Addison was sharing with us her research. I have one of my students here who is running the board for us, and she looked up and she was like, Kendall, you were doing such a great job running.
It was not you apparently. So can people hear me right now?
Yeah, you're good.
I just want to say to the audience, whoever's out there on YouTube, yes, this was completely legitimate, fair use of the footage from Get Out because I was doing analysis of it. TDV, do you want me to, like, I have the script for this for my paper. I can finish reading it. Or what I should do right now.
Yeah, no, I'd say continue. Let's in a discussion forum. Why don't you share with us the rest of your research, and then what I have some questions actually, and of course, I'm a huge fan of this particular presentation from the conference back in July, and I would love to touch on some of the same themes that you presented here in this conversation. So tell you what, why don't you continue down the path of your research, wrap that up so that you have a fully realized experience there. And then Dr. Blackwell and I will chime in and have discussion with you about your work.
Okay, well, I mean, I won't read the paper. I'll say a few things, but I will also say, could you post in the YouTube, like on YouTube, the Vimeo link to the entire thing so people... Hello out there. You're more than welcome to watch it if you want to. So I don't know exactly, when it ended, but I'll just connect kind of what I was saying to what Dr. Bonner was saying, because like using the film to kind of situate or provide a parallel to the experiences of Black faculty at white institutions. So basically using like critical race theory to say like these things are kind of baked in and embedded. And I think that the brilliant thing that Jordan Peele did in Get Out is to kind of, even if he wasn't explicitly using critical race theory, to say like, look, these things are baked in and embedded, and they've become so accepted that people can't even see them. Therefore, people who want to be villainous, such as the Armitage family, can essentially operate with impunity, and they're not satisfied with, so they're essentially in this hegemonic position, but they're not satisfied with being in that position. So the characters in this film, the Armitage family and their entire cohort, the people who attend their, quote, auction or market, where they're essentially offering Black bodies to white people to inhabit, it's this using possession as this metaphor, this trope that allows us to explore how like white dominated society is basically exploiting and appropriating the lives of Black citizens. And Jordan Peele is operationalizing that through the mechanism of possession, which goes beyond just like trying to appropriate music or culture, and to essentially arguing that this white-dominated society, through the mechanism of this through the characters of this family, is trying to take everything down to the identities, the bodies, and the culture of Black citizens, so that it's all just gone and has been basically sucked in by these white characters, and that no one can recognize this. So it's kind of like that Stepford Wives thing, because Jordan Peele talked about Stepford Wives, and Joanna Eberhard is there, and she just can't believe that this bizarre, complex thing is actually happening. And the same is true for Chris Washington. He's there. All of these red flags are popping up, but he just can't believe that something so nefarious would be happening. His friend Rod can see it, but even when Rod goes to Black detectives with his theory, which is not exactly the truth, but it's pretty close to the truth, they laugh him off. So the protection that the Armitage family has is that no one believes it. And it reminds us that things that are systemic can essentially become invisible in their operation, but no less brutal in the effects that they have. And so Jordan Peele kind of uses possession in the horror genre to make that kind of argument, even if he wasn't explicitly leveraging like critical race theory to do it. I think his film does have that framework. So I guess like that's where I'll wrap up. But I feel like Dr. Bonner's presentation and mine are sort of connected. Is Dr. Bonner here? Or maybe Dr. Blackwell, you and I can jump in on that. But that's kind of a wrap up of my paper, everyone. But I think it connects to Dr. Bonner's work through CRT. And anyone who's interested in taking a look at it, if you don't get the link, just email me, heather.addison, ADDISON at unlv.edu. I'd be happy to share it with you. And I'd love to hear what everyone's thinking is. If I don't know if people can post questions or comments, I'd be happy to try to address those. Anyway, I guess I'll wrap up there.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Addison. I know that because we ended up kind of jumping links, I'm not sure how many are at the new able to chime in with questions, but I'll kind of start things. And I think TDV had some questions she might bring in as well. So yeah, first, thank you for that presentation. Really interesting and thought-provoking stuff. I had a few thoughts around just your general theme of possession. And in particular, you know, my experience with the horror genre is that while possession is a common trope, one of the differences that I noticed with Get Out is that in most horror films, possession is by some supernatural being, right? Like you're possessed by a demon or a devil.
Spirit. Yes, yes.
Sort of spirit. And obviously in Get Out, the possession is by, you know, another person, another human being. And I'm just curious, I know that you teach the horror film class and probably have a lot more knowledge in the genre.
Maybe not, we'll see.
Is this an actual kind of new direction or a new take on possession? And just kind of what are your thoughts on it in general? Just kind of
like I've been trying to explore that, and I would say that the answer is a qualified yes, because I think, you know, Get Out is sci-fi horror, although there's some science fiction films that have maybe been looking into possession and kind of as a mechanism for the plot. And I've been trying to look at this globally. So sometimes it's aliens, like I would argue in like District 9. You know, there's one of the characters, God, I'm going to forget his name now, but he gets exposed to some of the alien secretions and then begins to sort of become an alien himself. And by the end of the film is essentially transformed into an alien. There's a German film, Transfer, which again, sci-fi, is about basically wealthy patrons trying to exploit immigrants, right, by taking over their bodies. There's a Japanese two-part series or two-part film, Parasite, Parasyte, about alien parasites that take over humans. But one young teenager, he's got his headphones in, everyone. So the parasite can't get in his head, so it possesses his arm. And the two of them kind of form a relationship and end up, you know, defeating these aliens that are taking over humans. Black Box is a recent example, 2020, a scientific framework for possession. So is Possessor. There's also an Indian film, Mayavan, which involves like this villain who can use like scientific means to jump bodies so that the police can't capture him, and he can continue his basically serial killing activities. So I think there's more and more interest in possession in the science fiction genre. Although classically, I mean, it's still big in horror. One of the most interesting American films to come out other than Get Out with possession, I would say, is Hereditary, Ari Aster in 2018, involving like but that's a demon again, that's supernatural means. And so most of it is that. I mean, even if you go back to like The Shining, that's a murderer who possesses Jack Nicholson. There can be like Japanese films. We just watched Ring, which is not necessarily about possession, but it's about angry female spirits who are out. And some of them actually do engage in possession, not specifically in Ring, but they're taking revenge for the way that they've been mistreated by father figures. So that's kind of a very interesting take on like this patriarchal dynamic where women have less powerful roles, but the men's responsibility is to take care of them, to treat them well. And if men don't fulfill that responsibility, women are then justified in taking revenge, either through possession or as ghostly spirits from beyond the grave, sort of wreaking havoc with people because they've been mistreated in this patriarchal context. Like the contract was not honored. So often, like in Japanese films, spirits are not evil in and of themselves, but these are people who have been wronged in life who then come back to take revenge. So ghost, spirits, possession, it's usually this sort of triumvirate, but Jordan Peele gives it this kind of startling new twist. And it's not just like, I mean, there's a clear explanation for how this is happening. So the film offers this scientific context. And if I may, I'd like to say that I think there's a subtext for that because of the way that the scientific community, especially in the United States, was exploiting Black Americans for experiments without their consent. There are some very shameful examples of that. So this then is like one more instance of the way the scientific community is exploiting Black citizens. And I'm guessing that that's part of, Jordan Peele's intentions, but if not, I think it's there in the film. Anyway, I can stop there. I assumed we'd be watching doing our presentations for most of the session, so I don't necessarily have a lot of comments to offer, although I'm happy to do that.
No, you're perfectly fine. This was outstanding, actually. First of all, my apologies. That
it's okay. We just roll with it. That's
sometimes it's like, no, there's only but so much you can do.
I didn't even think of that.
That's all right. We're here though. We're good. I was hustling in the background, just kind of looking at that and listening to you at the same time. And something that jumps out for me with your presentation in particular, and I was texting Dr. Bonner to see if we can get him back on since we changed broadcast, since we changed links, is looking at horror film as a testimony of what's happening in society is something that is pretty unique to, by and large, to Black filmmakers, right? When I think about white films or films that feature a white villain, for instance, your Freddy Krueger or, just go down the history of it. The socio-political connection isn't necessarily there as politically charged as, say, what something that Jordan Peele creates, for instance. Through the lens of the work that the way that you have worked on Get Out, what does it say about the trend of horror movies? That are we moving in a direction where horror movies are no longer just an amusement park ride? That we're not going to see I Know What You Did Last Summer for the sake of the fun of it. It's going to now have this sort of attachment to a social commentary. One series that I loved, and I'm kind of heartbroken that it's not back, is Black Mirror. And one of my favorite episodes is the episode with the bees, the mechanical bees, where through social media, people posted, like a kill message, if you will, to certain people. And eventually those people who tweeted or retweeted those posts were attacked by these mechanical bees. And there's a social commentary with it that made it so relevant and even darker. Are we moving into that direction, this new direction of horror, where we're looking at realism through the lens of horror, the horror genre?
That's a very perceptive question. I'd say a couple of things about it. Like, one of the reasons I find the horror genre such a rich space for viewing and study is that it's one of the most transgressive genres, and it provides a safe space. Like, in some ways you would say, why would people put themselves through this? Why would they want to look at these incredibly violent, transgressive things on screen? And I think one of the answers is it allows us to explore some of our deepest fears and anxieties in a safe space, kind of within that cinematic frame. I would argue that the best horror films have always had at some level substantive social commentary. So they will take us on a difficult journey that forces us to ask some difficult questions about ourselves and the way we operate or the way our society is structured. So I hope that Get Out does that for all kinds of viewers, like Black or white, kind of taking us on that journey and forcing us to ask those kinds of difficult questions and confront some of these fears we might have individually or as a society about some of the things that are inequitable, that we're not doing right, some of the ways that we could be vulnerable. I think one of the ways that this recent cycle of Black horror films, like led by Jordan Peele, I would argue, what it does is provide, as you use this word testimony, this testimony to remind everyone else, like these, like what it's like to be Black in the United States and the kinds of fears that might come with that. So one of the brilliant things, even in the first few minutes, this doesn't relate to possession, but in Get Out is showing us what a risky space the suburbs can be. Because previously in horror films, the suburbs were often like this safe space, and something monstrous sort of crept in. But in Peele's film, we're reminded that the suburbs can be this very anxiety-inducing, potentially unsafe space for many Americans. And so Peele really leverages that in his film. So I think some of this recent cycle of Black horror has become this new wave of testimony for African Americans, like in this country, and a reminder for all of us, like that you might think a certain space or context is safe, but it is not safe for a huge minority or even majority of the population. So it's a reminder, and again, it's like cultivating empathy, asking us to put ourselves in that situation and to understand what we might not think about otherwise. So I think that's really brilliant. And of course, leveraging possession in this new way. Of course, I think there's a lot of subtext related to like slavery in this film that like Jordan Peele has explicitly said that he intended. So he does a lot of things here, but crucially, he does it all so well. Like, I think you take all of that subtext aside, and this is a brilliant film. So we study it in my horror film class for many reasons, like the cultural context, but also for the masterful filmmaking. And I mentioned something at the beginning, just in terms of the glass of white milk and then the bowl of multicolored, Fruit Loops separate from each other. But if you watch the film, almost in every frame, you can find things that add layers of subtext to this film. So I appreciate its artistry, but I also appreciate from a cultural studies perspective, maybe what Jordan Peele intended to be there, and then what we as audience members might experience as we watch the film. Are we getting close to wrap here?
No. I was going to turn it over to Dr. Blackwell.
Dr. Blackwell, yes.
Before I kind of take over with all my questions. Go for it, Doctor.
Okay, yeah, I can ask something else. So one of the things I thought was really interesting about what Dr. Bonner presented was just describing Get Out as a theoretical frame. I know that he's not in here right now, but I think that in some ways, even in the title of your piece, Dr. Addison, which focuses on the sunken place, there's a reference to, I think, an aspect of this film that has kind of become a theoretical framework for how everyday people understand certain like racial dynamics in the world. Will make reference to sometimes pop culture figures as being in the sunken place. I think about Kanye West because I'm somebody who thinks a lot about hip hop, as somebody who has been labeled that way and has kind of, engaged with that discourse in some ways. And so I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on the use of a film like Get Out, not as a subject of analysis, but as a lens of analysis? And do you think that this is something that we could extend beyond maybe just Get Out to other popular culture texts as not a way to analyze the piece for the sake of analyzing the piece, but use the piece and the ideas that are presented as a tool for analyzing other things in the world, if that makes sense?
I would say yes, yes, and yes. And you might argue that that is even the way. So, I mean, what is theory, right? Theory is essentially a framework for making generalizations about things beyond just that one thing. There's nothing that says that theory has to be written, that it has to be printed. And I would argue there's a whole generation of theorists, in all disciplines emerging, like on YouTube, for example. So, and I had a professor back in the day who argued that experimental films functioned as essentially theories of cinema, based on the way they articulated various possibilities in style and form. I would say that you could argue that Get Out is theoretical, not only in terms of the framework it provides for the horror genre, but maybe for understanding like race relations or systemic, discrimination in the United States. And again, Jordan Peele may say, I intended that or I didn't intend that. I mean, I personally think he had a very sophisticated approach to this film and the way it was going to function. But in the end, we have the film. So if we take that film and apply it as a theoretical framework, it is then theory. I mean, so we have the film itself, and I actually think the sunken place is a wonderful way to describe like that emerging theory. Like you could argue that it's a slang term almost for CRT, like the sunken place, like that it operationalizes CRT and provides kind of an accessible way of understanding it. One of the reasons I think that, as academics enter the field, we get very proud because we can understand like these dense theories, but one of the problems with them is that they're not accessible. And, so much scholarship, we publish in journals and a few people read it, and that's great. And I think it helps us as thinkers when we're talking to our students to kind of, frame the discussion. But one of the key questions around anything scholarly or academic is accessibility. And Get Out, you could argue it is a theoretical framework in and of itself for the horror genre, for, race relations in the United States, for a more, popular version of CRT. And again, I'm just spinning out here. I'm brainstorming. I'm not saying definitively everyone, but I'm speculating. But I think it is key to understand that, I could, in one sentence, I could theorize something like, based on my understanding of Las Vegas weather, I think we're going to have a sunny day tomorrow. I'm theorizing, I'm extrapolating. It's deductive reason, or it's inductive reasoning.
Sure.
So anytime, and I could theorize like in my personal relationship with someone, well, he's done it before, he's probably going to do it again. So they're all levels of theorizing, right? And in the humanities, we often take a phenomenological approach. Like if so many film theorists over the years, they literally are like watching films and, I think this is the way it is. Therefore, that's the way it is. In communication, it's more of a soft science. So you're like, hey, should we actually go out and get real like experimental evidence here, everyone? And then use that to theorize? But here and of course, communication can be science or humanity, but here in the humanities and the arts, we're confident to just theorize from one film or whatever it is. But then, of course, if you can adduce examples that seem to agree with your theory, then it gains strength, right? So it doesn't become a theory unless other people subscribe to it. So, I mean, Why not have filmmakers who are theorists? Yes, those things should not be. There's no reason to separate them, just like there's no reason to say that cinema itself has to tell stories. It can have any form you like. There are infinite possibilities. The same way with theory. And I've been so impressed to see like the whole generation of, YouTubers who are emerging as a version of theorists. Some of them have been trained in the academy, some have not. But I think we need all of that, like both and, like it means that the conversation is energized about what this thing can be. And if we don't have that, we don't have anything.
That's how you stick the landing, ladies and gentlemen. If you don't have that, you don't have anything. Yeah, we have these conversations around theory here at Prairie View in our communications program, very similar to what you're discussing. I think as practitioners, people forget that in order to make a quality piece of storytelling or a great documentary or to be a brilliant journalist, you have to understand theory and how those lenses amplifies your point of view and your direction towards research, and how that just gives your work that much more gravity and a foundation overall. Dr. Blackwell, do you have anything else for Dr. Addison? I did try to text Dr. Bonner to see if we can get him back on. I know he's doing double duty today. He's literally in Delco Hall, right across the lawn from us right now, multitasking. And as I said earlier today, it is homecoming week here at Prairie View.
That's
and
crazy.
When I tell you we are all rocking our purple, but we're all kind of got like 6 different things going on. And I was just
I don't know how you do everything that you do. You're amazing.
It's people like yourself.
Yeah,
that works with me and helps me keep going. Yeah.
The StreamYard platform is really cool. So I really appreciate being introduced to it and everything that you did to set up this symposium. I know it was a ton of work. And I think we're going to circle back later in the day with some of the people from UFEA and Prairie View and possibly other HBCUs to kind of talk about, the potential.
Yes. The potential, indeed. One thing that I love, and just to say to the audience, if you have any questions or anything that you want to ask Dr. Addison, Dr. Blackwell, I'm going to be a doctor pretty soon too. I mean, I'm very excited about that too. But if you like to ask these good folks any questions, just put them in the comments where you're watching. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or the various platforms. I know we had to interrupt the broadcast a little bit, and I thank you all for coming back. I can see from the numbers you all came back to the new link. If you have any questions, put them in the comments, and we can amplify them on the screen just as you see it here. I had another question.
Can you
go
ahead. My link out there, my Vimeo link, in case.
Oh, absolutely.
I know you're all busy, but watching this thing.
But why don't you put it in the private chat, and then I will put it in the private chat, and I will copy and paste it, because since we're on a new link, that stuff didn't carry over. Okay. Oh wait, maybe I have it here. I have it here. Never mind. I'm gonna save you a little bit of work here.
Too late. I already put it in there, but so everyone who's out there in YouTube land, thank you so much for being here. If you have any questions, heather.addison@unlv.edu or unlvfilm@unlv.edu. And thank you for watching. And that's it.
Excellent. We're going to put Dr. Addison's presentation on our website at kpvutv.org/symposium. You will be able to watch the entire presentation. I think the hiccup has been that we use a platform that gets really prickly about how much content from other sources, even if you're doing scholarly work. Her work is brilliant. When I tell you, I sat in Dr. Addison's presentation in July up in Buffalo and watched her give this presentation. And she was gracious enough to allow me to sit with her and banter back and forth with some feedback. Because
and I incorporated that feedback, so it's slightly different now.
So you have to watch it to see. She's such a brilliant person. My students are in and out of the studio. I love it. This space is open. But the reason we want you to see the entire presentation is that she's put a lot of work into dissecting the socio-political conversations around race and identity, around gender, and really infused some dynamic conversations and things I hadn't thought about, quite frankly, when it comes to Get Out in particular and Jordan Peele's work in general.
Can I say one other thing?
Absolutely.
For anyone who watches it, I'm interested in studying films about possession. So if you have ideas, send me your film titles.
I should really introduce you to Mrs. Dalvest, Michelle Dalvest, my better half, because that's what she's fixated on, like films, The Exorcist, and I don't think I've seen The Exorcist since I was a child and just refused to. But she loves that sort of work also, where she's, I would love to put the two of y'all together and y'all can talk all about it.
That'd be great. Actually, I'm most interested in 21st century films that are doing it. Yeah. So anyway, just to say that. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great lives and all of that.
Excellent. Dr. Blackwell, anything from you, sir, before we close out?
I think, well, maybe I'll throw out one more question, but to both of you, just kind of to discuss. So we've talked about the idea of using Get Out as a theoretical frame. We've talked about this idea of the potential parallels between the things that are happening in Get Out and some of the experiences that people are having, in particular in academia. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are around the kind of resolution of the conflict, right? So in the film Get Out, the way the conflict is resolved is you literally get out of the space. And so if you're having experiences that, in your own life, in the real world, maybe in your professional life, in academia, that seem to mirror or connect to what's happening in Get Out, is there a way to resist from within and retain oneself? Or is getting out really the only way out?
Well, that is a very potent question. There are no easy answers. But I mean, I feel like the film is saying, like, look, everyone, the way things are going now, the only option many African Americans have is to get out. And that's wrong. I mean, and actually, Peele intended an even more bleak ending to the film, if everyone is aware, right? So Chris Washington was going to be arrested and jailed at the end of this thing. And so even as he tried to get out, he wouldn't be allowed to get out to any kind of freedom. He would only be allowed to escape imminent brain surgery for incarceration. So this film is, to me, is kind of like is trying to foreground the question, like, and actually, like, he was developing this before, I mean, I don't want to get too political, but before Trump was elected, when we were sort of like, oh, Obama, could we be post-racial? And then it was immediately clear that we were not, like, clear to everyone, like by 2016 that we were not, but maybe not clear to, like, there was a moment where, and I'm from the Midwest, so people celebrating in Chicago, Oprah there, like, oh, Obama's been elected. And so it felt like an important moment, but one that hid the fact that one individual does not change an entire system. Sure. And so Get Out is basically trying to say to everyone, I think, like, this is my reading of it, like, this is still there. It's still a huge problem. We can't ignore this. And the characters in this film, like, everyone ignored it. Chris Washington, up to the moment, he's like, Rose, I love you. Even though there were so many red flags, like, he literally couldn't believe that this was still happening to him. And some of that is like horror film cliches, like, you have to have them there until the last moment, but it's always it is also, to me, a reminder that this is our reality and we cannot ignore it, even if it's invisible. So it raises the question, how do we allow everyone to get in and stay in? And I think Dr. Bonner, I wish he'd been able to rejoin, because I think he has maybe some answers to that. But of course, it just said, in terms of basic human connection, it's listening to other people, like really listening. You can't be in their shoes, but you can try to understand, like, listen to what they're telling you, to really hear it and to try and figure out how you can be sympathetic, empathetic. To me, that's like step one, and a place where everyone feels welcome. We haven't achieved it, but that's the ideal, and we have to keep working toward it, even if it means we have to understand that maybe we're part of the problem. We have to become part of the solution. I don't know what the solution is, but anyway, just to say what I think Get Out is telling us is, right now, this is the only option left to a lot of people. That is wrong. How do we address that? And it's a reminder that it's still there in this very potently, systemically, even if many people in the United States might want to believe that that's not the case. And I think one more thing. He says that he changed the ending because when it was so clear that we were not post-racial and things were pretty horrible, he wanted to give people some hope at the end of the film. So Rod rolls in his TSA vehicle and manages to extricate Chris from that situation. But to what? Like, we don't know what happens next for Chris. Is he still going to be pursued and arrested? We don't know, but at least he's, for the moment, rescued by Rod.
Yeah, that makes me think about the. I was just going to say what you're saying about kind of the system and all.
No, go for it.
How in the conclusion of the film, obviously the house essentially kind of burns down. This is kind of what's happening, and I forget the name of the maid character who kind of says something to the effect of, like, you've ruined my house or you've wrecked my house.
Yeah. So that would have been Rose's grandmother.
Right.
I'm going to blank on her name too, but yeah, you ruined my house. So please continue.
And so, aside from Chris getting out of the space, there is kind of a destruction of what was essentially the home base of this operation, which I think maybe could speak to some of what you're saying about disrupting the system and moving things in a different direction structurally.
Oh, that's actually, oh, I'm going to add that in because that's very good. I didn't think about that actually. The burning, whatever, the house itself has been undermined. So maybe that's a hint that something's starting to change systemically. So the film does offer, and I don't know if he intended that in his original ending or added that too, but it does imply hope for change, because the Armitage house at least has been, if not physically, metaphorically burned down. They're all dead. So like that line is gone. There is still the whole group, the whole Coagula group. What are they going to be up to next? But again, it's that flame of hope, because that house has been burned down. Chris has escaped for the moment because at least one character was able to see the danger and come and effect a rescue.
Yeah. We definitely need to wrap up here, but I am still struck by the idea that these people, once they're in Black bodies, do they think that the world that they will live in will accept them? Because they're going to be Black people now. So when they leave that compound and go out into the world, they're going to be, I mean, with the exception of the artist who wanted Chris's eyes, right? He's going to maintain, he's going to keep his body and his identity as a white man. But the housekeeper, the Armitage elders, the grandfather and the grandma, they're Black people. Like, did they think that through? Because now they went from being incredibly privileged to then being put in bodies that made them more able, sure, made their life a lot longer, absolutely. But now they're in the bodies of, I would love to see a part 2, if they weren't killed, I guess. Yeah. What their life would look like had he gone into society as a Black man.
I think sorry, Derek, were you going to say something?
Oh, go ahead.
To me, Teresa, you've honed in on what are the logical flaws in the film, because even so, the most brilliant films, they have kind of gaps in logic. So like, as I was watching this, I've watched it many times at this point, like it's a question I've had, like, oh, okay, this coagula procedure has presumably been around for a bit, right? So when people show up, when like the cohort shows up, why haven't more of them like become Black? Like, why is there only essentially one other person showing up who has, undergone this procedure? Why aren't there more people in the Armitage's circle who are Black? And then what about that? Like, so the Roman Armitage has now been this caretaker, right? So wouldn't he want to still have a powerful role in the family? Wouldn't he want to still have his place? Isn't that part of the point? And by stepping into this Black body, has he undermined that? The film doesn't really explore kind of really the longer term consequences of this, right? Like, if this procedure's been going on for a while, where are all the other people who have undergone this procedure? What are they doing now? Have they experienced racism because they're now in these Black bodies, and it's harder for them to integrate at the highest levels of power? Like, what has happened there? I mean, the film does show us like the Frankenstein's monster kind of notion of this, because it's like a white consciousness in a Black body. And when Chris is trying to interact with Walter as the groundskeeper, like, Walter can't be Black. He can only operate, like, he doesn't have that whole cultural history and experience. So he can only be himself, it's this weird concatenation of this white consciousness with a Black body, where Chris has expectations that aren't met when he interacts with Walter. But the film doesn't explore like the long-term ramifications of this, probably because it can't. I mean, I think it's very tightly plotted for what it does, but it raises all those questions, right? Like, have they thought this through? They're now in Black bodies. How does that change their position in society? Shouldn't there be more of them? What problems have they encountered, et cetera, et cetera? So that would be a great sequel.
Well, with Jordan Peele, we have no idea. We may find ourselves with a Get Out 2, Get Out again, Get Out now.
Or maybe get in, like these characters trying to get into their former positions in Black bodies. I don't know. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's all right. I want to thank you both and Dr. Fred Bonner, Dr. Heather Addison, and certainly my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Derek Blackwell, for joining us today and giving us some great insight on Get Out in a variety of different fashions. You know, we're not done with this shebang bang yet. At about 2 o'clock, we have another session that will kick in. Session number 2, Black Horror in America, the story of us. We're going to look at more of a broader look at horror, the horror genre, and certainly through the lens of Black horror. We're going to hear from Dr. Donald Deffenbach with University of North Carolina at Asheville. He is presenting his research defining Blaxploitation and Black voices in horror film, William Crane to Jordan Peele. And then we're also going to hear from Nicholas Smith, MFA from University, SUNY Fredonia, the State University of New York in Fredonia. That's where Heather and I, along with the University Film and Video Association, recently held the national conference for the UFVA in upstate New York. And Nicholas is going to present Horror in Haiti, digging up socio-cultural truth in The Serpent and the Rainbow. I remember that film years ago, seeing that. And again, another one that kind of freaked me out. It was during that same era as, say, Angel Heart, and what was it, the mid 90s, during the 90s. A great time for some really stylized horror films that are rooted in Southern rituals and the Caribbean. And we're going to hear from 2 brilliant people starting at 2 o'clock today. So go to our website, our Symposium website, where you can see all the videos. I've updated it. I was scrambling while we were having some technical difficulties to update the site to make sure that you always have access to our broadcast during the next 2 days. I think even though, our new studio is fancy and it's got all kinds of bells and whistles and I love it, it's all fashioned out with the Symposium, I think I am going to sit right here and continue to work from here, just because I feel like I can best handle any sort of troubleshooting. And our students are out enjoying homecoming. It's homecoming here on the Hill at Prairie View. And if you've never been to an HBCU homecoming, child, let me tell you something. You might not have ever gone to homecoming. We invite you here next year, actually. Next year, we're going to host this same symposium, but live and in person. We're going to continue to forge relationships and find new people to amplify. And hopefully you will join us again today at 2 o'clock. To dig some more into Jordan Peele. I appreciate your time, y'all. Come back 2 o'clock and I will see you soon.